List of Dad's Army characters. This is a list of characters who first appeared in the British television comedy series Dad's Army 1968-1977. In addition to the 7 main characters, all members of the fictional Walmington-on-Sea Home Guard platoon, the series featured a large cast of recurring characters, many of whom began to appear regularly in episodes, particularly following the death of James Beck, who played Private Walker in 1973. In addition, a number of characters appeared in significant roles in a single episode or series. Main platoon members: Captain Mainwaring. George Mainwaring, a Mainwaring, was played by Arthur Lowe. He was the pompous, if essentially brave and unerringly patriotic, local bank manager. Mainwaring appointed himself leader of his town's contingent of local defense volunteers. He and Private Walker were the only adult members of the platoon with no prior combat experience and therefore had no medals, which was a source of embarrassment for Mainwaring and sometimes caused tension with the other members. He did, however, serve in France. During the whole of 1919, somebody had to clear up the mess. Although an ensemble piece, the series focuses particularly upon Mainwaring, who has invested all his efforts into the platoon as a way of escaping from an unhappy marriage to Elizabeth. Sergeant Wilson. Arthur Wilson, played by John Le Mesurier, was a diffident, upper-class bank clerk and Mainwaring's inferior in the bank and on parade. Nevertheless, his suave, understated social superiority, public school education, and handsome looks led to a certain amount of jealousy on Mainwaring's part, but Wilson was never particularly bothered by this. He would also subtly question Mainwaring's judgment by asking, "Do you think that's wise, sir?" after Mainwaring had given an instruction. Their rivalry came to the fore in A. Wilson Manager, in which Wilson is appointed manager of another bank, and The Honorable Man, when Wilson inherits a title. Wilson lodged with Mrs. Pike and her son Frank, and it is implied, though never explicitly stated, that he is Frank's father. During the First World War, Wilson had been a captain and fought in the Royal Artillery at Mons, Gallipoli, and the Somme. Lance Corporal Jones. Jack Jones was the oldest member of the platoon, born 1870, but was played by Clive Dunn, who was 48 when he took the role. Jones was an old campaigner who had joined the British Army as a boy soldier and served under Kitchener of Khartoum in the Sudan between 1896 and 1898, and also served in the Boer War and the First World War. By 1940 he was the town butcher, which enabled him to supplement his superior's meat ration occasionally. Jones was leader of the platoon's first section. He has a story for every occasion, and will never hesitate in telling it, regardless of how long-winded or irrelevant it is. Despite his age, Jones demonstrates an almost boyish enthusiasm for combat, in particular the use of the bayonet, accompanied by his catchphrase, "They don't like it up 'em." He was easily excitable and would repeatedly yell "Don't panic" in moments of crisis. He was also keen to volunteer for any task, no matter how ill-advised it might be. In Battle of the Giants, Jones suffered a malaria relapse. Private Frazer. James Frazer was played by John Laurie. The character, who was born in 1872, was a dour Scottish coffin-maker and a retired chief petty officer in the Royal Navy who was at the Battle of Jutland as a cook. Frazer was blunt, tight with money, and had a gloomy outlook on life. He would proclaim "We're doomed" in bleak moments faced by the platoon. In the early episodes, Frazer kept a philately shop, but by Series 4, the writers had decided that he should become the local undertaker, in keeping with his gloomy nature. Openly eager for more power within the platoon, he sometimes led rebellions against Mainwaring. In response, Mainwaring temporarily let Frazer take over as captain in If the Cap Fits. Frazer was the only member of the platoon to be portrayed as a villain in episodes such as A Soldier's Farewell and The 2.5 Feathers, though for the most part he was loyal and well-intentioned. Despite his age, he is one of the more competent members of the platoon. Private Walker. Joe Walker, born 1906, was played by James Beck in the television series and 7 episodes of the radio series, and by Graham Stark for 5 radio episodes, with Larry Martin for the remainder of the radio series. A black market spiv, he called himself a wholesale supplier. Walker was the only fit, able-bodied man of military age in Walmington-on-Sea's Home Guard. His absence from the regular armed forces was due to a corned beef allergy, although it was implied that Walker had probably found a way to play the system. Mainwaring often turned a blind eye to his profiteering, as he could supply the platoon and Mainwaring with useful items. On more than one occasion, Walker's willingness to use underhand tactics allowed Mainwaring's platoon to triumph over rivals in the Home Guard, Army, and ARP. He irritated Mainwaring with his penchant for making wisecracks at inappropriate times. Following Beck's death in 1973, Walker was written out of the series. The platoon found a note from Walker, explaining that he had gone to the smoke to conduct some business, and he was not heard from again. Private Godfrey. Played by Arnold Ridley, Charles Godfrey, born 1871, was the frailest member of the platoon, and was the platoon's medical orderly. He had served in the First World War as a conscientious objecting stretcher-bearer in the Royal Army Medical Corps, winning the Military Medal, before becoming a gentleman's outfitter at the Army and Navy stores. Godfrey was a gentle, amiable but vague bachelor who lived with his spinster sisters Dolly and Sissy in an idyllic cottage, and was a martyr to his weak bladder, leading to many requests to be excused. He was very loyal to Captain Mainwaring, except on one occasion when he took part in a plot to make Mainwaring's feet hurt. Private Pike. The youngest platoon member, born 1922, played by Ian Lavender Frank Pike, a cosseted mother's boy and often the target of Mainwaring's derision, "You stupid boy," was a junior bank clerk. He called Wilson Uncle Arthur, and although never explicitly stated, it was often evident that Wilson and Pike's mother were in a relationship which they unsuccessfully tried to hide, and Walmington is rife with gossip about the couple. Wilson is often seen having meals at Mrs. Pike's house with Frank, and Pike mentions several times that Wilson spends the night, although he believes he sleeps on the sofa, whilst Wilson accidentally lets slip that he was in fact in bed with Mrs. Pike. It was also occasionally suggested that Wilson was Pike's father, although the writers only acknowledged this in interviews after the program ended. In an early episode, when asked by Captain Mainwaring why Frank calls him Uncle Arthur when he is not a blood relation, Wilson states that it was Mrs. Pike who had insisted from an early age Frank call him Uncle Arthur, and that this dates from a point in Frank's childhood when Frank had started to accidentally call Arthur Wilson something else, Daddy. He frequently threatens to set his mother on Mainwaring whenever he is shouted at or forced to do anything he doesn't want to do. He has the lowest position at the Swallows Bank branch, subordinate to both Wilson and Mainwaring. Non-platoon characters. Chief ARP Warden Hodges. William Hodges Bill Pertwee is Mainwaring's main rival in Walmington-on-Sea. Born in 1893 and a greengrocer by trade, following the outbreak of war he has been given power as Chief Air Raid Warden, and that power has gone to his head. His catchphrase is "Put that light out." He can be as pompous and officious as Mainwaring, with whom he has a fractious relationship, but is uncouth and coarse with dirty fingernails. Even the usually calm Godfrey tells Hodges he is a rude, common and nasty fellow. He delights in antagonizing the platoon, in particular Mainwaring, whom he calls Napoleon. This rivalry increased after he was forced to share the church hall with Mainwaring after his headquarters was bombed. Unlike Mainwaring, Hodges did fight in the First World War and developed a profound dislike of bloomin' Yanks in the process. Hodges tries to take charge of important situations as an ARP matter. However, as he also displays a cowardly streak, in any danger he is quick to transfer command back to Mainwaring and withdraw. In several episodes, Hodges refers to having funny turns, such as "put that light out," which hints that he may suffer from a neurological condition. In some episodes, Hodges and his co-conspirator, the Verger, try to sabotage the platoon's efforts, sometimes at the command of Captain Square. But these efforts typically backfire, a running gag being that Hodges would be thrown into a lake or river, often with the catchphrase "Ruddy hooligans, 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 liggins, liggins, ruddy hooligans, liggins, hooligans, liggins, liggins." In the episode High Finance, Mrs. Pike Janet Davies reveals that Hodges is her landlord and raised the rent on her house from £1 a month to £2 a month, which she could not afford. He told her she could owe it, only to say later that she owed him £50 in back rent, which he would forget if she was nice to him. He claims to have admired Mrs. Pike for years, although she is besotted with Sergeant Arthur Wilson. Despite his hostility toward the platoon, Hodges has sided with the platoon in times of need. In the episode Wake Up Walmington, as there had been no German invasion, the townspeople had grown indifferent and contemptuous toward the platoon and the wardens. To shock them out of their apathy, Captain Mainwaring and Hodges joined forces, and the Home Guard disguised themselves as foreign invaders to scare the town into taking the war, and them seriously. Hodges even occasionally has moments to indicate his character has a softer side. In The Deadly Attachment, when one of the German sailors fakes being ill, Hodges is taken in and urges Mainwaring to do something, showing concern for the German as a fellow human by remarking he's some mother's son. On the other hand, in the episode My British Buddy, Hodges has no hesitation in showing his contempt for bloomin' Yanks and the United States' late entry into the war, sarcastically remarking to the visiting American Army colonel it's an improvement on last time. Hodges has a Scottish nephew, Hamish, who insulted both the Home Guard and the ARP in The Recruit, and a niece named Sylvia who briefly dates Private Pike, much to both Hodges and Mrs. Pike's chagrin, in The Making of Private Pike. His feelings towards both Mainwaring and his wartime responsibilities are summed up in the episode Time on My Hands. While Mainwaring is stuck up the town hall clock tower, Hodges shouts, "I hope you stay up there to let me enjoy this war in peace, because I do enjoy this war. I've never enjoyed anything as much in all my life. And you always spoil it." In the radio sequel, It Sticks Out Half a Mile, Hodges enters a business partnership with Frank Pike to renovate Frambourne Pier. In this series, his first name is Bert rather than William. He is revealed to have had a past love interest with a woman called Myrtle Spivey. They went to Bognor Regis in the summer of 1929, when Hodges went to get her a drink and never came back. He is also revealed to be married in this series to a big beefy girl who is always bossing him about, called Beatrice. Mrs. Pike. Mavis Pike Janet Davies was Private Pike's mother, who appeared in many episodes. She is fiercely protective of Frank and Arthur Wilson, to the point that she is accused of mollycoddling by Captain Mainwaring. Frank often mentions his mother will be furious whenever he gets wet or muddy whilst with the Home Guard. He often threatens to tell Mum when Wilson will not let him get his own way, and tries to frighten Mainwaring by setting his mother on him. Mavis can be quite formidable when she wants to be. In the episode The Making of Private Pike, Mainwaring threatens to arrest Frank, and his mother vows to Wilson that she would make his life a misery for the rest of his days if he lets Mainwaring take Frank away. Mrs. Pike's occupation, if any, is unknown, but she often volunteers her services to the Home Guard. Warden Hodges is her landlord, and he is enamored with her, but she does not reciprocate his feelings. It is also implied very heavily that Mrs. Pike is Sergeant Wilson's lover, and there are many rumors of Frank being Wilson's son, a fact often pointed out to Wilson by Mainwaring. Both arrived from Weston-super-Mare around the same time, and Wilson unofficially lives with them, although Frank naively believes Wilson sleeps on the sofa, despite it never looking as though it has been slept on. It is not clear if Mrs. Pike is a widow, as her late husband is never clearly mentioned, although Wilson admits that as a child, Frank called him daddy, implying that any husband she had must have died when Frank was a baby. Wilson claims that she's a widow and she has my ration book and I go round to her house sometimes for meals and that sort of thing, and she often asks him if he will be around to her house for his usual, much to his embarrassment. Sometimes people remark on the similarity of S.G.T. Wilson and Private Pike, in particular their mannerisms in the episode Boots, Boots, Boots. Although she expresses frustration with Wilson at times, telling him on occasion that he takes her for granted, and has had moments in the series where she's been seen out with other men, including even Warden Hodges at one point, Mrs. Pike ultimately remains devoted to Wilson, and is inconsolable on the occasions where she thinks he may have left her for someone else. In the episode Sergeant Wilson's Little Secret, Wilson agrees to marry Mrs. Pike when the impending arrival of an evacuee child at the Pike household is miscommunicated to him, and he thinks Mrs. Pike is pregnant. When the misunderstanding is resolved, S.G.T. Wilson jilts her at the altar, as is explained in the opening dialogue of the next episode, A Strike for Frazer. In the 1971 film, Mrs. Pike was played by Frazer. In the 2016 movie, Mrs. Pike is portrayed by former Coronation Street actor Sarah Lancashire. The Vicar, the Reverend Timothy Farthing M.A. Oxon Frank Williams, is the petulant, ineffectual, but kind and well-meaning vicar of St. Aldhelm's Church, Walmington-on-Sea. Neither on the side of the Home Guard nor of the ARP wardens, he attempts to care for the spiritual needs of his parishioners, despite the many setbacks presented during the war, such as having to share his church hall and office with both the pompous Captain Mainwaring and the uncouth Warden Hodges. He is portrayed as a spiritual and learned man, and is shown to be a Master of Arts of the University of Oxford by his academic hood, worn in the episodes All is Safely Gathered In and The Royal Train. In many episodes he ends up embroiled in the escapades of the platoon, often by accident, and he joins the Home Guard briefly in The Recruit. In the episode Time on My Hands, it is revealed that his hobby is archery, when he uses his skills and equipment to rescue the platoon. This episode also includes one of many insinuations from Chief Warden Hodges that the mildly effeminate vicar may be homosexual. I've heard you're an expert in fairies. Despite his unmilitary appearance in the episode Battle of the Giants, it is revealed that the vicar served in the Great War. He was awarded the 1914 Star, the British War Medal, and the Victory Medal, commonly known as Pip Squeak and Wilfred. The medals are lovingly polished by Mr. Yeatman. In this episode, Mainwaring is acutely sensitive about his own lack of medals. Typically, he dismisses the vicar's contribution as 2 verses of Rock of Ages in a French field while they brought the rations up. The vicar's sexuality is left open to speculation, but he is never seen to have a romantic attachment to anyone of either sex. However, in the episode The Captain's Car, the vicar expected a kiss from a visiting French general and was annoyed when he did not receive one. Timothy Farthing is also fond of whiskey, and there is a recurring gag in pub situations where Captain Mainwaring will offer to buy the vicar a drink and the vicar will respond a double whiskey or Scotch please, at a time when whiskey was in. Just as Mainwaring is resigning himself to pay for this expensive beverage, the Verger will usually insist that Mainwaring change his reverency's order to a single rather than a double, as he's a martyr to it. When Mainwaring orders a single rather than a double, the vicar will then inform him that he has noticed this and imply that Mainwaring is mean. In the 2016 movie, Williams reprised his role as Timothy Farthing, being the only actor to play the same character in the TV series and both films. The Verger. Maurice Yeatman, Edward Sinclair, is the local verger and captain of the local Sea Scouts unit. Although his name is Maurice, in the episode War Dance Jones announces him and his battle-axe wife as Mr. and Mrs. Henry Yeatman. He is often hostile to the platoon. Labeled a troublemaker by Jones, he is ridiculously loyal to the vicar and to his good friend and accomplice Warden Hodges when it comes to causing problems for the platoon. He is constantly asserting the vicar's opinions on subjects, often only to have the vicar tell him to be quiet, Mr. Yeatman, and override him, or simply to restate what Mr. Yeatman has already said in his own words. Often when the verger puts forward a morally judgmental opinion, the vicar will respond that I've really no idea. Apart from the menial task of cleaning the hall, Mr. Yeatman is referred to in early episodes simply as the caretaker, and almost always seen to be carrying a yellow duster. He occupies a position of complete political impotence, and when the need for his presence at an event is questioned, he will respond, I'm here in my capacity. Often when Captain Mainwaring and the vicar or other members of the cast hand each other a physical MacGuffin important to the plot, for example the money in high finance, the verger will intervene, snatching the object only to hand it back, to make clear his important but superfluous role in the administrative processes of the parish. Mr. Yeatman is also in charge of counting the church collections after services, which he often does in the Red Lion public house. Throughout the series, there are numerous insinuations from Lance Corporal Jones and Chief Warden Hodges that Mr. Yeatman is engaged in the systematic embezzlement of church funds, but the vicar seems to be either in denial of this reality, too trusting and naive to believe it, or he simply turns a blind eye. Like the vicar and Warden Hodges, the verger is a veteran of the First World War and is noted in Battle of the Giants as having received several medals. In the episode Big Guns, he is shown to be familiar with the components of a large naval artillery piece, suggesting along with his captaincy of the town's Sea Scouts that he served in the Royal Navy. Mrs. Fox, Sus Fox. Mrs. Fox, Pamela Cundell, was a Walmington-on-Sea housewife who pursued a relationship with Lance Corporal Jones. The amorous, larger-than-life Mrs. Fox, Pamela Cundell, gives her matronly attentions freely to the platoon's men, and she eventually marries the elderly but eligible Corporal Jones. Lance Pettit, Museum of Broadcast Communications. Described by Captain Mainwaring as a flashy woman, like many of Jones's customers, on producing her ration book she receives an extra sausage, much to the chagrin of another shopper, Olive Mercer, later to be cast as the wife of Mr. Yeatman. In return, Jones receives an enormous wink that sets the tone for much of what was to follow as the role develops. Mildred, originally Marcia Fox, is an ebullient woman who has an off-screen husband in this first episode. By the big parade, transmitted exactly a year later, she is referred to as a widow, so presumably she lost her husband between these episodes. There followed a long-running saga in which Corporal Jones wooed Mrs. Fox, often with hilarious consequences. At one point Jones describes the relationship as merely Teutonic. Whenever he seems to be making progress, a setback occurs. For example, the arrival of American servicemen turns the heads of the Walmington-on-Sea women. Victoria Wood said in 2000 that part of the success of Dad's Army came from its juxtaposition of comedic situations, such as the rivalry between various ladies of the town to play Lady Godiva, and the exploration of more complex emotions between older people. As the series drew to an end, co-creators David Croft and Jimmy Perry debated whether to marry off Jones and his merry widow. This finally happened in the last episode of the series. She asks Captain Mainwaring to give her away. Her brother had also died during hostilities, and she no longer has any living male relatives. Right at the end, she refers to herself as Mrs. Jones. Although initially given as Marcia, her Christian name later changes to Mildred. The actress Molly Sugden played the role in the radio series. Other platoon members. In addition to the 7 featured players, 1st Platoon B Company also included a 2nd section and a 3rd section who filled the platoon up to size while on parade or display. The men of the platoon were the cap badges of the Queen's Own Royal West Kent Regiment. The back rows rarely spoke, although according to Jimmy Perry, instead of extras, they were normally retired actors, playwrights, or singers. A handful of platoon members had a secondary but significant role in particular episodes, Private Sponge Collin being a sheep farmer and de facto leader of the platoon's Section 2. The extras, although he never actually achieved the corporal's stripes normally associated with a section leader. Appearing throughout the series, he made more frequent appearances as the show went on, particularly after the death of James Beck, and had a part in 76 episodes. Dad's Army creator Jimmy Perry came up with the name when he saw the word sponge on a shop sign, thinking it unusual and attractive. Private Thomas Bracewell John Ringham, an upper-class buffoon, who was set to be a major character in the series. Due to the large number of major characters that were introduced and also because he was too similar in character to Godfrey, it was decided that he was to be dropped. He only appears in the first episode of the program and was mentioned in the second episode. Ringham also appeared in 2 episodes as Captain Bailey. Private Cheeseman Talfrin Thomas, a Welsh journalist who originally appeared in 1 episode in Series 6, after the death of James Beck he joined the platoon for Series 7. Although Thomas was a capable actor, David Croft wrote that the character was irritating without being funny, and as an exotic Celt he was too similar to Private Frazer. John Laurie was strongly against the character. The writers decided that Cheeseman should not return for Series 8 and 9, but they would make more use of the existing minor characters. A character called Charlie Cheeseman, played by Jimmy Perry, appeared in the 6th episode of the first series, but he was unrelated. Cheeseman mentions a wife in Turkey Dinner, but Mrs. Cheeseman is not mentioned again. Private George Nobby Clark John Cater joined the platoon briefly when he tried to dig up dirt about Jones's history in the Sudan. He was revealed to have had an affair with his commanding officer's wife, and when this was revealed in Jones's retelling of events, he fled Walmington, never to return. Private Desmond Cullum Jones features in the episode Sons of the Sea, in which he joins the first section on a river patrol and does not speak at all. In total, he appeared in 63 episodes in other non-speaking roles. Other members of the platoon were named as Private Hancock, played by actor George Hancock, 60 episodes, Private Elgood, Private Woods, Private Meadows, Private Agnew, Private Bailey, Private Day Peter Henry, Private Hardcastle, Private Hastings Hugh Hastings, Private Hope, Private Locke, Private Lovekin, Private Macy, Private Wiper, Private Dowding, Private Eccles, Private Forcus, Private Taylor. These were played by Leslie Noyes, 49 episodes, Vic Taylor, 37 episodes, Hugh Hastings and Evan Ross, 34 episodes, Freddie White, 51 episodes, Freddie Wiles, 57 episodes, Hugh Cecil, 50 episodes, Richard Jack, 17 episodes, Peter Whittaker, Martin Dunn, and Chris Franks. Other recurring characters: Janet King Caroline Dowdeswell, Series 1, a young blonde employee at Mainwaring's bank. According to the series creator David Croft, she was introduced at a fairly late stage in the scripting because the BBC head of comedy Michael Mills believed that the program needed a soupçon of sex. Although she never appeared after Series 1, she was mentioned in the Series 4 episode A Wilson Manager, and was played by a different actress in the 1971 film. Colonel/Captain Square Jeffrey Lumsden, all series, commander of the Eastgate platoon of the Home Guard and rival of Captain Mainwaring. A stereotypical military buffoon with a handlebar mustache, in early episodes he was portrayed as a corporal in the Home Guard and was referred to as Corporal Colonel Square to acknowledge his previous commissioned officer rank in the regular army. He was later promoted to captain and placed in command of the Eastgate platoon, which is first revealed in Don't Forget the Diver. Square had a serious military record, fighting in the desert with Lawrence of Arabia and winning several medals, including the DSO. In A Brush with the Law, it is revealed that he is a magistrate. Square was even more pompous than Mainwaring and acted condescendingly towards his inexperienced rival, such as by deliberately mispronouncing Mainwaring's name. Despite his contempt of Mainwaring, Square was on excellent terms with Wilson, possibly because they had in common an upper-class background. He was also very complimentary to Lance Corporal Jones in the episode Battle of the Giants, noting Jones' many ribbons that he'd earned during the course of his military career, and telling Jones that on his chest he carried an illuminated history of the British Empire. In the episode A Wilson Manager, he commissioned Wilson as the lieutenant of his Eastgate platoon. Square could be overconfident at times, and Mainwaring and the Walmington platoon did sometimes get the better of him and his platoon. Dolly Godfrey, Amy Dalby, and Joan Cooper, Series 2-9, Private Godfrey's younger sister. Renowned for the quality of her upside-down cakes and cucumber sandwiches. Although she appears rarely, she is constantly referred to by her brother. Amy Dalby played her in one episode of Series 2, The Battle of Godfrey's Cottage, dying 2 days after transmission, and then Joan Cooper played her in one episode of Series 8, Is There Honey Still for Tea?, a Christmas special, The Love of 3 Oranges, and the final episode, Never Too Old. Cooper, who was actually married to Arthur Lowe, also appeared in No Spring for Frazer as Miss Baker, an undertaker's secretary, and in Time on My Hands as Miss Fortescue, a tea-shop owner. Cissy Godfrey, Nan Bronton, and Kathleen Saintsbury, Series 2-8, Private Godfrey's other sister, appeared in one episode of Series 2 and 3 episodes of Series. Bronton reprised the role in 2 episodes of the radio series, in which Cissy was Private Godfrey's only sister. The role of Cissy was later taken over by Kathleen Saintsbury in an episode of the 8 television series, and by Joan Cooper, who had previously played Dolly Godfrey in the television series, in an episode of the 3rd radio series. Bronton played Cissy in one episode of Series 2, The Battle of Godfrey's Cottage, and 3 episodes of Series 3, The Day the Balloon Went Up, or Dance and Branded. Saintsbury played Cissy in one episode of Series 8, Is There Honey Still for Tea? Raymond Dick Haydon / John Ash, Series 3-4, the young lad who assists Jones at his butcher's shop in the High Street. He is mentioned in multiple episodes, but only appears in 2. In the first he was a young man in his 20s, in the second a lad in his early teens. In Big Guns, Jones refers to his assistant as the boy Ronald instead of Raymond. As well as Raymond, Jones employs an unseen woman named Miss Doris Mortimer to handle the money and ration coupons. Reg Adamson, Stuart Sherwin, Series 3-5, easygoing warden, who is sometimes overpowered by Hodges' zeal and unscrupulous methods, particularly his vendetta with Mainwaring's platoon. He gave evidence against Mainwaring in A Brush with the Law. Mrs. Yeatman, Olive Mercer, Series 3-9, Yeatman's forbidding wife. In War Dance, Mrs. Yeatman is referred to as Anthea, while in Nights of Madness her name is Tracy, and in Everybody's Trucking her name is Beryl. She appeared from time to time, mostly in situations when she was able to express impatience, for example, as a member of an over-large committee planning a social function or in a queue in Jones's butcher's shop. She led the Walmington-on-Sea ladies' netball team. It emerged, after Mrs. Yeatman had caught her husband taking an afternoon's ride on a motorcycle with the flirtatious Mrs. Fox, that, somewhat improbably, she herself was involved in an extramarital relationship with the elderly Sidney Blewett. Sidney Blewett, Harold Bennett, Series 3-9, an elderly retired gentleman who held a variety of part-time jobs. During the series, he was seen as a photographer and the vicar's gardener, but often as a passerby who became involved in the platoon's escapades. Sidney is referred to as Norman by Mrs. Yeatman. He also had a brother called Horace, and mentions a wife in episodes including When Did You Last See Your Money? And A Man of Action. Gerald Don Estelle, Series 4, a diminutive Lancastrian ARP warden, seen in various episodes. He usually appears as a friendly but slightly frustrating sidekick to Hodges. He played cricket for the Warden's Roman 11 in the test. Edith Parrish, or Shirley, Wendy Richards, Series 4-6, Walker's recurring girlfriend, appeared in 4 episodes. Edith, although she is referred to as Shirley in The King, was in His Counting House and My British Buddy is a Cinema of Sherritt, and was played up to be a bit of a tart, 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 of a tart. In particular, she annoys Mainwaring by suggesting that he fancies her. Colonel Pritchard Robert Ragland series Formanus 9, the superior officer from whom Captain Mainwaring most frequently received his orders. A stern, serious man, he unexpectedly appeared to admire Mainwaring, frequently commenting on his successes and warning people not to underestimate him. Raglan also played Captain Square's Sergeant in Don't Forget the Diver and Inspector Hardcastle in the feature film Dad's Army 1971. Mr. Claude Gordon Eric Longworth series 5-9 The efficient but pompous town clerk, described by Wilson as a silly bald-headed old duffer. Involved in administrative issues in the town, he has a penchant for saying things are very nice. The mayor of Walmington Fred McNaughton series 6-9 Walmington's highest public official. His appearances usually involve playing the straight man to his excitable town clerk. Once, when watching a Keep Fit display, he responds to Mr. Gordon's remark of "That's very nice" with a straight-laced "yes, if you like that sort of thing." He also takes part, in full ceremonial dress, in a thrilling train chase in the episode The Royal Train. There are allusions to a habit of making long-winded speeches, but it is Captain Mainwaring who makes those allusions. In reality, the mayor cuts it short while Mainwaring is the one who tends to long-winded speeches. Elizabeth Mainwaring, unseen character Captain Mainwaring's wife. Her presence is mainly indicated by her telephone calls to her husband. The nearest we get to seeing her is in one episode where we hear her footsteps, and another where we see her very large posterior hanging down above Mainwaring when they are in bunks in an air raid shelter, giving a clue to her figure. Wilson is the only one who has ever met her, but when asked to describe her he cannot, although he admits she looks a bit odd. Through dialogue it is clear that Mrs. Mainwaring is cold, reclusive, and withholding of affection, and that she is clearly the dominant figure in the marriage. It is often implied she may be an alcoholic, as Mainwaring is repeatedly revealed to be buying bootleg whiskey and gin from Walker for his wife. Mainwaring often uses the platoon as a means of avoiding her and prefers not to introduce her to other people, lest she upset them. Sometimes Captain Mainwaring appears sporting minor physical injuries, such as a black eye in the episode War Dance, for which he offers comically unconvincing explanations, such as walking into the linen cupboard door. It is strongly insinuated that the injuries are the result of domestic violence, and they often seem to happen before a function or event where other women may be present, to which Elizabeth is invited but cannot attend as it would involve going out. Perhaps she is an agoraphobic, but she does venture out of the house off camera in the Godiva affair and is away visiting her sister in various episodes. We discover in Never Too Old that Mrs. Mainwaring was the daughter of the suffragan Bishop of Cleethorpes, a fictional see, and her parents looked down on Captain Mainwaring as marrying beneath her. In A Soldier's Farewell, Mainwaring claims she is vegetarian. Guest characters: Barry Mainwaring, Arthur Lowe, the long-lost brother of Captain George Mainwaring. He appeared once in the entire series, in My Brother and I. He and his brother apparently always clash due to their differing personalities, with Barry repeatedly referring to his brother as Po-Face. He worked as a traveling salesman for a joke shop. Colonel Schultz Allen Tilvern, commander of an American advance party detachment posted in Walmington-on-Sea. After a fight between U.S. troops and the Home Guard, Mainwaring is ordered to make a public apology. Captain Stuart Michael Knowles, a smarmy officer from the War Office, who informs Mainwaring that his platoon have been picked for special duties, which in fact means digging latrines and peeling potatoes. One of several similar characters portrayed in the series by Michael Knowles. Captain Ramsay Fulton Mackay, a tough but fair Scottish officer who runs a training course to test Home Guard units and assess whether they are 12-star material. His attempts to make the weekend a serious test of the men are frustrated largely by the idiocy of Corporal Jones and a stray consignment of onions, and he quickly becomes exasperated. Rams's favorite catchphrase appears to be "You haven't done very well," which is quickly amended when Mainwaring and his men pull off the best bit of initiative I've seen in this whole war, for which he awards them the coveted 12 stars. Fulton Mackay's character seems to have come straight out of his Mr. Mackay persona in Porridge. Fulton Mackay also appeared as a doctor in the episode The Miser's Hoard. U-boat Captain Philip Maddock, commander of the crew of a captured U-boat that brings Mainwaring and the platoon face to face with the Nazi enemy in the deadly attachment. He is a supercilious brute who keeps a list of Britons who offend him so that they will be brought to account when we win the war, which unsurprisingly gets Mainwaring's dander up. He is also cunning, as when he tricks his captors by feigning illness. He presents Mainwaring with one of the platoon's most dangerous situations in the entire series when he takes them prisoner and plans to take them back to France, only to be foiled in the nick of time. General Monteverdi Edward Evans, the senior Italian officer in a POW camp who tries to defend the scruffiness and general laziness of the Italian detainees. He was captured serving in North Africa, apparently because he refused to fight against the English. Mainwaring clearly does not think much of him. It is revealed that Monteverdi is complicit in Walker's scheme to smuggle prisoners out at nights to work for him. Mrs. Prentice Brenda Cowling, an old friend of Godfrey, now in possession of her late husband's farm which needs harvesting. Mainwaring volunteers the platoon's services. In gratitude, she organizes supper and potato wine for the platoon, which leads to some high spirits. A widow, having spurned him to marry a farmer, Godfrey hints at a more intimate moment when he tells her he hasn't touched potato wine since that night. Captain Rodriguez Allen Tilvern, a Spanish Civil War veteran who is only interested in killing Nazis. He dislikes the platoon of amateurs and thinks Mainwaring should go back to running a bank. He is portrayed as a vicious, unpleasant character. He appears closer to a bandit than a captain in the British Army. Mr. West Robert Dorning/Blake Butler, a bank inspector from head office. Shocked at the irregular running of the Walmington-on-Sea branch. A pompous and highly strung character. Violet Gibbons Jenny Thomas, an ATS girl to whom Pike is briefly engaged, much to Mainwaring's disapproval. She had previously worked at Woolworth's, a fish and chip shop, and for while dated Private Walker. She appears at the platoon dance, where Pike announces their engagement. Looking bored and chewing gum, she does not entirely appear to return Pike's unquestioning adoration, and, much to everyone's relief, the engagement is quickly broken off. E.C. Egan Fred Truman, a professional fast bowler recruited by Hodges as an ARP warden in an underhand attempt to win the friendly cricket match between the wardens and the Home Guard. Egan reckons he can skittle Mainwaring's men out in about 4 overs. However, he badly injures his shoulder after his first delivery and has to leave the field. In his absence, the Home Guard go on to win the match due to Hodges declaring early. In reality, Truman played many matches for England. Lady Malpy Mavis Pug, a local aristocrat who lends the platoon her Rolls-Royce for the duration of the war. She is socially acquainted with Sergeant Wilson, much to the irritation of Captain Mainwaring. Her late husband was a greengrocer. Mrs. Fiona Gray Carmen Silver, a charming lady, recently arrived from London, who joins the platoon after it begins recruiting women in the episode Mum's Army. She shares a brief encounter-style relationship with Captain Mainwaring before leaving unexpectedly. Patrick Regan J.G. Devlin, a suspected member of the Irish Republican Army, the platoon are ordered to arrest him, but only a few are available. Trouble comes when his associates come looking for him, leading to a brawl. Fortunately, Wilson proves to be handy with his fists. Police Constable Arthur English, a Walmington police constable deputed to arrest Regan. He came alone, as the rest of his station were busy playing a darts match with the Free French. He warns that Regan may be an ugly customer, but Mainwaring ignores his advice. General Menzies Campbell Singer, local commander, visiting the platoon while Frazer is in temporary command in the episode If the Cap Fits. He mistakes him for Mainwaring. He invites his fellow Scot to address dinner to pipe in the haggis. Frazer hopes this will embarrass the English Mainwaring, but to everyone's shock Mainwaring had learned the bagpipes on his honeymoon, foiling Frazer's scheme. Mr. Palathorpe Jack Haig, landlord of the Six Bells just outside Walmington. When the platoon, dressed as Nazis for the production of a film, enter the bar and demand to be served, he is convinced the balloon has gone up and triggers an invasion alert. Haig had previously been considered for the role of Lance Corporal Jones and also appeared briefly as a gardener in the episode The Day the Balloon Went Up. Sir Charles McAllister Campbell, singer, a distinguished Scottish politician. He appears in Is There Honey Still for Tea, where he is blackmailed by Frazer, who threatens to expose his unsavory past into reciting the proposed aerodrome that threatens Godfrey's cottage. Mr. Bugden Peter Butterworth, a harassed Walmington printer, whose firm's error leads to Corporal Jones being interned as a dangerous prisoner of war. Mr. Rhys Edward Evans, the Welsh town clerk of Walmington, as seen in Big Guns. His administration appears to have preceded that of Mr. Gordon, as he only appeared once early in the series. Mainwaring's strained dealings with him appears to be typical of his relationship with small-town officialdom. Mr. Sedgwick Eric Chitty, a mild-mannered Walmington shoe shop proprietor. Sylvia Hodges Jean Gilpin Hodges' niece, a member of the ATS, appears in Walmington during the episode The Making of Private Pike. She attracts the interest of both Wilson and Pike. She and Pike go on a date together to Eastgate Cinema, during which they borrow Mainwaring's new staff car. Relations between them begin to disintegrate when the car breaks down on the way back, forcing them to spend the night together. This leads to some widespread assumptions, causing Wilson to now regard Pike as a kindred spirit. References equals